It's Tuesday once again, greeting everyone a good day wherever you may be watching this podcast episode. I'm Boyd Benavides, President of IARFC Philippines Chapter, and one of your anchors for this season of the RFC Tuesday podcast. Welcome to the third episode of our seventh season. Joining me from Cebu Province is my co-anchor and fellow RFC, Andre Obieres. Hello, Andre. It's great to have you again for our third episode.
Hi, Sir Boyan. Good evening, everyone. Of course, it's another very interesting episode. We have a very interesting guest for tonight, but there's also someone that we would like to talk to, and of course, learn from. So joining us tonight is none other than the main driver of this season's podcast, the force behind its progress and development, the great Susan Kappa, IARFC Public Relations Officer. Welcome, Susan.
Hello, good evening, good morning.
Good evening and good morning. So we would like to thank you, for your awesome partnership with us in the podcast. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people want to know how you're able to come up with, the list of guests for the podcast. All amazing. So, just like a white paper, could you walk us through, how you qualify the guests, and then how you orient them and prepare them for the podcast, especially, considering the time difference?
Okay, I would love to do that, but first I just wanted to tell what a pleasure it is to work with all of you. You've been a source of a lot of learning and cooperation between the association and the international chapter. So thank you for doing this podcast. Now, I would like to say that there's some kind of scientific method that I utilize to pick the guests, but that would not be true because I interact with a lot of our consultants. I will try to find guests that I think are interesting, that come across through the register, through the board meetings, through our trustees, and I try to investigate their background and see, would they make an interesting story for the consultants for the Philippines to enjoy, not just from the fact of their experience and their knowledge, but through their human story. And I think you will see that evident in the person that we're going to interview tonight and his story, other than how he has exceeded and excelled in his career. So I try to look at their websites, I talk to them, and then throughout the year, I'll come up with, I think I'll save them for a podcast. And that's basically how I qualify them. Then what I do is I started doing this with I think the first guest. I feel it's my job to not only orient the guests, but also orient the interviewers. So I put together some prep sheet, I call it, that gives all the information that the interviewers would like to know, the guest's bio, their experience, work experience, how long they've been in the industry, any other little tidbits that would be interesting to use at the show. I put that down on paper. Then I come up with a list of questions after looking at their website, or like I said, because I know them, I put together a set of questions that pertain to the topic that they're going to talk about. After I put that together, then I actually go to the guests themselves and I get them on what I call as a prep call. This usually lasts about 45 minutes to an hour if I do my job correctly. And we go over all the questions that the interviewers are going to ask. So they sometimes will add questions, or they will say, Dad, this doesn't sound right, or I will change things. But by the time we get finished in that 45 minutes, the guest will know what questions are going to be asked. After that, I send it to the Philippines, to you guys, and you take it from there. You fit the questions in as you feel they belong, and that's how we work. That's how we roll. I found that on my end, I found it works very well for myself and for the guests, and I'm hoping I typically get good feedback from you, the interviewers, that helps you do your interview. So that's my process. It's worked, and I really, really enjoy my job and doing this with the Philippines. I look forward to it every season.
And
Susan, I thought you just got someone who was handsome and articulate, and not being able to find anybody, you got me. So here we are.
No. I consider a lot of different things.
it is a great process, and thank you so much, for the very informative guidelines, and especially for bringing those guests in our international for international season. All right, so
Yeah.
all right, so before we introduce,
sorry,
go on.
I just wanted to say too that the other part of my job is to sit in on the podcast and listen to what the interviewer asks and listen to what the guests say, and perhaps maybe coach them a little bit to say, don't forget to ask about this, or don't forget to say something about this, about the association, so that the facts get through correctly. So that's another part of my job.
Oh, yeah, that's also very helpful. Yeah. All right, so before we introduce our guest for tonight, let's thank IARFCPH, the Philippine chapter of the International Association of Registered Financial Consultants, for putting together this podcast. The IARFCPH is an association dedicated to the craft of financial consulting and is the sole organization authorized to conduct RFC conversion courses as well as continuing education in the field of financial consulting.
For season 7, where we have already aired 2 episodes. So in the first episode, our guests were the Can RC family, where we learned the importance of setting boundaries, respect for each other, and rules to be followed when working with family members, so that there's a clear distinction between family relationship, company relationships, and either will not seriously hamper the other. In episode 2, we had David Kinder, who discussed with us the key differentiations in our practice as RFC. So this entire season 7, we have prepared for you a list of powerhouse guest speakers who have made a mark in the financial planning industry and raising their practices to a high level through continuing education and ensuring financial planning legacy. So join us this entire season. Our guest for tonight is 2021 Lauren Dunton Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. He views the award as a way of honoring his family's legacy of over 145 years of service to the financial planning industry. After a 50-year career of advising clients, he continues to address wealth in 3 dimensions: personal, financial, and social, by educating university students, coaching wealth managers, and navigating multi-generational families through their total wealth transfer process.
Yeah, he's a pretty interesting guy. I mean, Roy sold his first life insurance policy before graduating high school, way back in 1976. He also earned a master's in insurance from Georgia State University and has qualified for MDRT every year for 45 years. And he also started a fee-based financial planning firm which ran from 1981 to 2020. And he was also top of the table for the last 17 years and is active in the Life Underwriters and CLU associations, as well as the RFC association. He attained his designation, RFC designation, and spoke on several occasions. Established a trust company, Argon Trust Company, from 2012, which is running to this day, and created the MTM Educational Resources, which is operating since 2018. And he retired in 2020 after 50 long years of service and successfully transferring his business to the next generation. So it's a perfect paragon of multi-generational, practice. And he has also written articles for Fortune Magazine, Financial Advisor, Distinction Magazine, Personal Excellence, Agent Sales Journal, Registered Rep Magazine, National Underwriters Magazine, a lot of magazines, and especially IARFC's The Register. And he has also been a speaker, the MDRT, LAMP, GMAC, IARFC, LIMRA Research Agency Group, Tiger 21, and he's also a philanthropist. He travels to Zambia for a family legacy mission, which is sponsored by his family's Diefendorf Family Foundation. With family members collecting over multiple trips for this faith-based mission.
So to start this episode, let us welcome an accomplished, if not outstanding, 50-year veteran, the fourth generation of his family business, currently the CEO of MTM 360, that's More Than Money 360, and treasurer of the IARC Board of Trustees, Monroe Roy Diefendorf, MI, CLU, CHFC, MRFC, CAP, and CAPA. Rowie, welcome to the RFC Tuesday podcast. We're honored to have you join us today from Laurel Hollow, New York. We really appreciate you taking some time from your busy schedule to join us and our viewers today. So, all right, let's get started with this episode. Roy, can you tell us, how did you start your career in insurance and financial planning, and then to becoming the CEO of MTM 360?
Well, it's in the DNA. So if you go back, it's 4 generations. So my great-grandfather was actually recruited in the insurance business, life insurance business, by his uncle, 1875. And as they started, it was the first life insurance company in America. Mutual of America became Mutual of New York. And he had the largest agency worldwide. And was a rock star in those days. And of course, his son came along and continued, died prematurely. Well, then my father finished World War II, came out of the war. He began and, became, well known in the industry, and was president of the General Agents and Managers Association, and received the award for management from the LAMP, and I would go around to industry meetings, and he was known as the legend.
Wow.
and they'd say, "Hey, Rowie, how's the legend?" That was interesting because my father, rather than taking the front stage, which he easily could have, kind of just pushed me out in front and took back thing. And his objective was to help me in my career. So that's how I got launched. And I actually started studying for my life insurance license while I was 17. And
very early.
when I turned 18, which was the earliest you could get it, I got my license, and before I got out of high school, sold my first insurance policy, and then went on to graduate school to get a master's degree in life insurance. And by the time I got out, that sort of catapulted the career. But I never had a bad day in that part of the the world of life insurance. What I did do is I started to specialize, though. And I went through various stages of my career. So early on, when I came out of graduate school, ERISA in America had started, had just passed the law, and new pension rules came in. And I thought, you know what? It might be easier to sell more life insurance if you're selling it with tax-deductible premiums. So we created a third-party pension administration firm. We did the actuarial work, and I found that to be true. And I did that for a while. We were the first firm with a group of actuarial firms to go cross-family of funds in the 401k arena. It's a retirement plan arena in the States. And we were bought out. And so when we were bought out, I just continued to manage the money. So then we had our registered investment advisory firm and did that strategy. And we built our own models. And then I started to say, well, you know what? I've got some things I'd like to write about and talk about in terms of sort of the more than money side. I'll get back to that. And a broker dealer who has sort of compliance overview, they said, well, every word you write, we have to approve. I said, well, what if you don't like what I'm writing? So, well, then you won't write it. And I thought, is this my future or is this my past? So I said, the only way to actually get my voice out and talk about the things that I think are important is to have my own broker dealer. So I became the smallest broker dealer in America and went down that path, and then I would, if I said it, I would have also approved it. And so the approval process was very quick. And at that point, probably 30 years into my career, we started to have, of course, working with my father and older clients, you'd watch these generational things. We started to get a lot of deaths. Now, I probably have had more death claims to handle than anyone I know. And we average at least 3 a month and have for the last 20 years. And so we're seeing that. So I got to see plans go from, start to finish. And I said, something's not going right. I mean, we worked on all the business agreements and everything else, and I thought we were doing a great job. And then all of a sudden, someone would die, and we'd take it out, and the wheels would fall off. The kids were fighting, all the things that you'd see on these television shows.
All the horror stories, right?
Right? And I said, something's wrong. So I sat back and had a whiteboard. I started making notes. I said, what are the questions that my clients are asking? And so I start to write them all down. And what I realized is that they were asking questions that our industry wasn't answering. Right? And what they wanted was, I don't want my kids to fight over this. Right? I don't want them to be entitled. Right? And the things that we had done, because we were piling up more money, and I thought that was the job, right? We were going to make them more money. And there gets to be a point in time where, yes, in the beginning, you're trying to earn, it's either people at work or money at work. Okay, so it's people at work and they're putting the money, and now it's money at work. And to make sure that you've got an inflation-adjusted standard of living that you want to have. And so you do all those financial planning things, but there becomes a point that it's a diminishing return. More money is not more helpful. And then it gets to a point where actually more money is more hurtful. And you can start to destroy future generations thinking that you're doing a great job. And I realized, hey, there's more to this than money. And so I started on this path. And the only thing my father said to me, he said, first of all, he said, don't forget the things that's gotten to where you were. In other words, he used to call it the lunatic fringe at the $1 Million Round Table. I used to go every year. He said, watch out for the lunatic fringe. He said, these are guys that are doing, gazillions of production. And you go, boy, that's great. And you stop what you're doing and you go do that and you fall flat on your face because it's them. He said, go to the meeting. He said, take 10% of what you hear, incorporate it into your practice, and you'll be 100% successful. And every year I went from that point on. I didn't have great expectations. I said, I'm just looking for 10%. So he said, here's my advice to you when you start to go down this more than money path. Take 10% of your time. Work on it. Don't forget the other things. And so over this period of time, I had been developing it and getting ready for a strategy to exit. When I say exit, I wanted to know, I see too many people that don't know what to do, right? They're in our business and they don't do it, so they hang on. And they love what they're doing, and they don't have anything else to do. And then they haven't thought about a succession plan. Well, my father was very wise, and we had a succession plan. So I'll give it to you to the day. And he did. A 7-year plan. And so I said, I'm going to do the same thing. So I did the same thing. And it sounds like it's an easy thing. I'll tell you, it was probably one of the most difficult things. First, I took the name Diefendorf out of the business, because I didn't want the burden, because I always felt this pressure.
Yes.
But I took it out of the business. I said, I'm the guy that's going to kill it and leave it so that way, because what we're doing is more than just Diefendorf, trying to create wealth for us. But then when it actually came to the time that I had to surrender, well, it was like someone died. And if I didn't have something to go to, like today, I get up, I have a purpose. I have something that I'm working for. And if I didn't have that, it would be very difficult. So the surrendering part, I wanted to go from success to significance, but it was actually in the transition that I had to go from significance to surrender. And that was tough. And so if I can, talk to, older or, more experienced advisors, is to think about that strategy and start to work on that. Well, translate that to families, right? Most families, what they're thinking about is, how do we keep creating more wealth? And some people think that if they stockpile enough, they can protect their children and grandchildren. Right? And so it's the other side of the coin that we need to really work on. And that's, I find, the one thing that, our financial institutions are telling us is, more insurance, more assets under management. That's the goal. Yeah. That's the objective. And I look at it and I go, I don't think that's the end. That's part of it. That's half of it. But how are we going to handle the other part of the equation? How do we handle the intangible wealth? Because you and I, we all know people who are financially wealthy, personally bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt, socially bankrupt, right? And how do we get it so that way all of the dimensions of their wealth can sink and be growing? We talked earlier before we went online here about some work in philanthropy. Well, the funds that we've allocated to philanthropy, right? My financial net worth has gone down, but my social wealth has gone up, right? Is the Diefendorf family less wealthy or more wealthy by having been involved in some of the charitable work? And I would say that we're much more wealthy as a family. We've had the good fortune of traveling around the world to, dozens and dozens of countries. And so, that is, use my wealth, my financial wealth, our personal wealth is expanded.
So for you, it's like a journey from your own experience going into a realization now that you're bringing it to your practice. So you're now taking your clients onto that same journey where they experience, like it's not just wealth, but it's also preparing the succeeding generations to take care of that wealth, either to grow it, but also to grow it responsibly, meaning that they don't just take it all onto themselves. So I guess from our previous podcast, also we were talking about philanthropy. It's like continuation of last season with you here. That now people are when we're talking about family wealth planning or multi-generational wealth planning, there's always that aspect of philanthropy. And like how do you bring your clients into this journey? And is it just for the wealthy, for the high net worth clients?
It's not. I mean, when you talk about total wealth planning, which I say is, personal wealth, who you are, financial wealth, what you have, and social wealth, how to make a difference. When you talk about that total wealth, it's for everyone, right? It's just that, I think that the myth for those ultra high net worth or high net worth families is they think they can insulate the problems or, ward them off with their money. In fact, that's not true. And so they can do more damage unbeknownst to themselves, right? Yeah. So those are the ones that we're actually spending time with, but it's for everyone, really. And everyone's got a purpose and everyone's got value. When I do some work in Africa, and when I'm there with kids, that's the point, is they're valuable, they're loved. And these are kids that come from the compounds and the slums. You know what? Tremendous value. And so that's what, so it's for everyone, total wealth management. But it's this two-sided thing. What you said, and I like the way it's really, one side is preparing the money for the heirs, and the second part is preparing the heirs for the money.
How do you prepare them? Like, is there a process that you go through with them so that they will see another dimension to their wealth creation and wealth spending?
Yeah, we put together a program. One of the things that I found is I went to a lot of industry meetings, and there would be a lot of talk about, transfer of wealth. This is going to be the biggest generation of transfer. A lot of theory, and a lot of this is going to be important, but I had a lot of trouble finding people that would connect the dots. And so I said, well, I'm going to go on this journey and I'm going to connect the dots. So, in the industry, you can't go, a day doesn't go by that you can't pick up a journal that doesn't talk about fintech, financial and technology. And I go, that's sort of the one side of the coin. So we're working on FamTech, Family Plus Technology. So we put together a technology platform that has what we call sort of the 5 elements. Where do they come from? Research on generative families. They studied 100 families that have had wealth for over 100 years that's been passing on. And we looked at those principles. And out of those principles, there were 5 things that came about. It was communication, values, gratitude, legacy, and governance. And so in doing the research, we said, what are the tools and assessments and things that we can do to help learn this in our families and instruct it or live it out and guide them in family meetings, family retreats, family forums. And so that's the tool that we've used. It can be any place. We've got clients all over the world. And we've been able to cut it down to a short, 30-minute segments, because we know that people don't have a lot of time. So we've organized it in such a way, and we've got it in 9 or 10 different languages. And so it's available, but those are the tools that help to engage the rising generation. Because this is the other thing I'll hear, and then I'll turn it back to you. But I hear them say, we don't get a voice. This is just another way for dad to control us with his money, right? And so here, what we're doing in this is we're asking them for their input. We want to hear from them. And as we're taking it in, our software aggregates the data, gives us the consolidated output, and says, hey, here's the impact of your family. Let's say it's values. We'll say, well, here's dad's value, here's mom's values, here it is, and here's the value that the family can have as an impact together. Powerful.
Well, that's the thing, no? It's always a challenge for the succeeding generation to talk to the previous generation, right? It's always their view is any forum that you bring together family, it's basically just the older generation passing on what they want to the next generation. When you talk about these 5 pillars or 5 important aspects of generational wealth planning success, like what are the challenges that you face whenever you bring together, like not just 2 generations, but maybe 3 generations of a family? How do you, as you said, they don't have the time. Sometimes they don't have the time, and most often than not, they don't want to talk about it even amongst themselves. Like, how do you solve that? Like, what are the other challenges that you face whenever you
we found that as a real
family
challenge.
forum?
And the challenge was really sort of the shield would go up where the next generation, the rising generation, would be resistant. It's again just a way to be controlled. So what we did is we said, let's put together a short program. It's 3 sessions, and we're involving all the family in. And so the sessions we call it a vision sort of casting session. And in that session, what we're doing is we have first one is on really sort of the 6 principles that successful generative families that can able to keep together what they put together and work interdependently, right? What are those principles education-wise? So it's an educational piece. The next thing that we talk about is sort of the more than money, the 3 dimensions of wealth. And so let's redefine wealth in more than money. If you think that your wealth is just dollar signs, and so we're trying to expand the definition. So we want that rising generation. Then the third one we do is what I sort of a gap analysis. We say, okay, let's get some input from you. And we do this wealth transfer preparedness survey. We say, hey, how well do you think your family is doing in, communication, values, legacy, gratitude, governance, in these 5 areas? How well do you think we're doing in those? And how satisfied are you? I mean, if they don't care, well, I don't care, but that's what we want to know. And we have that graphically put up. And now they can see that, hey, we're really not doing what we could do. And other families can do it, and other families are doing it. And when they start to realize that there is a plan that can be followed, now what happens is we finish that, and the kids have now, for the first time, and this is what I hear, no one's ever asked our opinion. We're asking you the opinion. And then the answer comes back, or what their statement comes back is, Dad, we need to do this. And when it comes from bottom up, not top down, but from bottom up, now we've got buy-in. And then we start the process of preparing for every family forum. So, you have a business meeting, you prepare for it. When we have a family forum and we're getting them together and to have fun, but yet have education and have governance structure that's put in place. But when we're doing that, our preparation is every month, 30 minutes with every family member that's engaged. And now you've got it. And this just goes on. And we've got some that have been, 8 years into the 9th year, because it's like going to school, right? If you're going to, you start in kindergarten and you start to learn, you don't quit after kindergarten and say, well, now I got it all figured out. Same thing here.
Yeah. I mean, with the participation of the younger ones, I mean, they get that buy-in, not just the buy-in, but they absorb the values of the older generation. So they make the values of the previous generation their own as well, right? And that's how they now manage the wealth moving forward. So it gives a very good vision for the family, for the succeeding generations. And of course, you have those governance mechanisms like maybe family offices, foundations, or family constitutions that will assist in cementing more the values that the family would want to bring towards the future. So I guess that's a very important thing in managing and in creating this multi-generational structures is the participation of everyone, not just the older generation, but most especially the younger generation.
When you talk about a multi-generational transfer, if a practitioner really wants to establish a value in his practice, it's what can you do in order to keep those clients for generations? So, I mean, we had a family client till the last one died maybe 10 years ago, but for 100 years, right? We've been working with this family. Right? How do you do that? Well, you need to get to know them. And this way of understanding the children and grandchildren and getting them involved, why it really they're not going to go anyplace, right? Yeah. And so it's becomes important to make sure that, like ours, the 5th generation is running our, investment management company and all of those things. And so it's a multi-generational practice dealing with multi-generational families. And when you can put those two things together, you will have continuity of your practice and your clients. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, it reinforces and creates harmony in the family for future generations. And it assures that the same values of the predecessors would be carried and fostered and would be alive in the succeeding generations.
There's a message to be given. We had a family. Normally, children don't come into a process till maybe they're 16, but we had a family of 12 children, and they included a 8-year-old. And they said, we understand that this child is really not going to get a whole lot of out of the things that we're doing. But we want her to understand that this is important. And this is part of who we are as a family. And we want her to see what's going on. This is how we, quote, do business. And as she grows along, by the time she's 16 and has got a number of years into this thing, she's going to get it down, right? So it's the message that the family is also saying is that, you know what, we care about this. I'll say one more thing about, in philanthropy, we find there are a lot of clients that say, you know what, we're going to give money to our alma mater, to our university. We're going to endow a chair. And so they can be, education going on. And I say, that's a good thing. I said, so you're putting up money to educate children who you've never met, and yet you failed to put the resources aside to educate your own children in order to help perpetuate your wealth. I said, is there something wrong with that, equation? They go, yeah, you're right. So we work on that.
I guess that's part of the process. Everybody's talking of philanthropy outside of families, but it's the same importance that you give in taking care that your family would have good education, roof over their heads, and that they will have the same opportunities as you had, right? Andre?
Sorry, there was some disruption. I'm actually I want to circle back on, dealing with the younger generation because, I'm part of the relatively younger part of the profession, right? And I want to know more about, the younger side. So could you tell us what is the biggest challenge in engaging younger clients or prospects? Hello?
The prospects are really not the younger gen. They come along. They're the future, right? So when I'm talking to, typically it's the business owner or the client that we've had who makes the decisions on, how we're going to fund this, how we're going to, pay for these engagements. And so the kids kind of come along. You need someone who's going to be the visionary that says, I have that. But, again, I talked about the issue is if the kids come in resistant, right? And they don't have any kind of, buy-in. It's like trying to jam it down their throat. They regurgitate it, right? So it's trying to move them along. But once they get involved, right? And they're doing things. Yeah, I say when you talk about philanthropy, it's either time, talent, or treasure. People always think of philanthropy. Well, who do I write the check to? You know what? Maybe it's time to have your time and your talents in your family put boots on the ground in philanthropy, right? And so those are the ways that as you're building impact experiences with families is when you're really going to have the deepest roots in their family tree. So the prospects are really not the younger generation. Where I'd say the younger generation is mission critical, Andre, is in the advisory side. Boy, every advisor who is over the age of 45, 50 at the latest, needs to have, a protege, needs to be grooming the next generation. Because I can tell you the clients who are multi-generational clients, that's what they're looking for. If you're a sole practitioner, if you're an RFC and you're a sole practitioner and you're going in to meet with a multi-generational family, it's going to be a hard sell.
All right.
But if you've got a multi-generational practice that they see there's continuity, now you've got a match. And so that's the real challenge for the RFC world is how do we find those next generations? How do we bring them up? I mean, I was an early adapter of the RFC. And, one of the things there were two things. One is ethics and education, right? And those are two big things. My father used to say to me, again, I'm in the Philippines. You probably heard of Mickey Mantle, but my dad said to me, listen, bro, he said, Mickey Mantle's sons wanted to play baseball. He said, there's only one trouble. They couldn't hit. He got them the audition. They couldn't hit. So he says, it doesn't make a difference who your great-grandfather, grandfather, it doesn't, father. He said, there's no replacement for education other than ignorance. He said, you better be committed to being the best you can be. Because when we're gone, he said, that's it. It might get you in the door. Your name might get you in the door, but it's up to you, right? And so those things at the IARFC are what drew me in. Now, the real part going forward, as I see it, is that, this world, when I started the IARFC, there was no internet, right? It was a different world, but the new world, the world is getting smaller and smaller. And to be able to deal with advisors or collaborate with advisors in the Philippines or with Australia or New Zealand, where I do that, and around the globe, boy, why can't I tap your expertise or you tap mine? And here's the resource that we have. And so there's two things: is use that international connection to better ourselves collectively, and then also, raise up the next generation. And that's where the IARFC needs to really come in and help fill the gap.
I totally agree. I find it interesting that you mentioned that, older practitioners should have a protege, because, if you think about it, a good chunk of our profession is really, it's very knowledge heavy, right? And there's a very important part of, having like an apprenticeship program. I think I've heard some RIAs in the US practice that, and yeah, I think if we would bring that, like to more practitioners, that could really change a lot of things. But anyway, uh, thinking about multi-generational wealth transfers, I'm also curious, is there a risk, or what are the risks associated with that?
When you ask families
Mhm.
what the risks are, and I say, well, what do you think is really the problem? And what's out there that's could be a problem? They say, taxes, that's a real
Right.
problem. Economics, political, and then we say, well, what about like communication? They go, oh, that's not a big deal. These other big out things. But the reality is the real problems, 85% of them are relational, communication, and 3% are dealing with taxes. And I look at it, I go, we're majoring on the minors. We've got all the education and all the tax provisions, code, trust, this and that. We've got it all. And that's not where the real risks lie. We think about risk mitigation. What do? We put in all kinds of asset allocation, right? We try to dampen the volatility, and we do those kind of things. You want to dampen the volatility or risk minimize, you better be working on the other side of the coin on more than money, because that's where the failure is. And I look at practitioners who think that the answer is more money. They're perpetuating. I don't have to lie, but they're perpetuating the risk. They're amplifying the risk. You want to minimize the risk, then diversify your practice and do more than money as well.
Yeah, powerful stuff. I just find it funny that a good chunk of the problem is really communication. There's a lot when money is involved, a lot of families have like the dysfunctions or whatever issues, they surface up and makes it all problematic. But uh I'm also curious about the technology, because uh I'm pretty sure that the US is pretty advanced. So I would like to know, or I'm sure our members would like to know, what kind of technology is used in transferring, wealth.
Okay, so the kind of technology we're using at FamTech, Family Plus Technology. So if you look at the website, ASPIDA 360, ASPIDA 360.com, that'll lay out, what the software does, or what, but none of it has to do with money, right? It all has to do with, How do we identify social styles? How do we identify appreciation styles? How do we identify learning styles? How do we identify leadership styles? And so these things, we're trying to build transparency. And again, if it's not on a device like this, my daughter said to me, she said, Dad, if it's not on my phone, I don't even look at my laptop. I go, what? She goes, no. I do everything. I do my banking. I do if it's not on that. So this device, which can be hurtful, but we want to use it as a tool to help bring it together. And so these elements, again, are only to help transfer someone's values, help to perpetuate gratitude and not entitlement, help to define a legacy, work on a mission statement, individual mission statements. We have like a Mad Libs kind of thing to help generate mission statement, a family mission statement. I mean, families have mission statements. If they can't articulate it or get to it in less than 2 minutes, it's gone. You go on there, front of the screen, right there, right. Top of mind, right? So all of the pieces are in one spot. Impact experiences that are so critical for the formation and stability of giving roots and helping to have wings in families, right on the screen. And so you'll see it. And, we've got hundreds and hundreds, and you can put on videos and texts and pictures and things that you want to commemorate. And then, so those are the areas that we're highlighting in the technology. And we'll put these packages together and visit with families. And side by side, working with the advisors, that's how you're going to get it. It's this teamwork, the collaborative approach. And we've got what we call navigators. We have facilitators throughout America. We got one in Canada. We're looking for others. We've got one potentially, in Taiwan, and so on we go.
Pretty cool stuff. So, in case, let's say we don't have access to, sophisticated programs like what you have in MTM 360, what could we do to help these clients?
Part of it is to get the conversation started, but I let me wind it back. When I realized that I was missing the mark, right, and that when I thought I was doing so well, the wheels fell off, I started to have those conversations, and the problem is I was gumming up the works. In other words, I would get data. I would be the central point. I was the only one that knew what was going on. I had to transmit it back. Time intensive, took a lot. There was not a lot of transparency. And then I realized there was only one way that I could see that was going to be able to bring the family together with all this meaningful data, and that was through technology. And so the technology platforms these days are not expensive. This is, again, it's not like the programs that I use for financial planning, the e-money kind of program that's getting all kinds of, gyrations and cash flow studies and, Monte Carlo analysis. Yeah. This is different, but we have training for each of these assessments, and, who are the researchers that put it together? And what's the meaningful part? I mean, we have one on transactional analysis, the egogram. How does that apply in a family? Especially when you're talking about multi-generation, right? You start off, you're the parent. Eventually, your kids will be taking care of you, and you'll be the child. How does that role change, right? And what's that happen in the dynamics? And what's the time frame in the middle when it better be adult to adult? Because someday, my kids will be feeding me. Later on. So a lot of the dynamics and understanding the transactions of interpersonal relationships, that's the kind of thing that brings the glue together. And when it gets to the tough part about talking about money, the platform of transparency, key part of transparency and trust that have been established, and giving permission to say, you know what? You're acting like a parent, right? You're treating me like a child. Or, you know what? that's a childish way of approaching it. Can we bring it to another level, right? Knowing when to take a time out, right? I've been in family meetings where it gets pretty heated, and okay, let's have a time out. Let's regroup. Let's think about it. Those techniques or those things, now you can get back to the money at hand and you can get back to it. But without that platform of communication to work all these offices, no one then wants to talk about it because it's going to be a hotbed. It needs to be talked about, right?
Great stuff. And I'm sure our members here would, can really learn a lot from what you just said. So, since we're almost out of time, we're actually quite curious about your involvement with IARFC. So, could you tell us the story on how you joined the IARFC and what value did the designation and the association itself bring to your practice?
All right. So I'm educated beyond my intelligence. I mean, I got more degrees than a thermometer. So from a master's degree in insurance, I was the youngest CLU ever back in the day. CHFC, CFP practitioner, a CIMA, Certified Investment Management Analyst, Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy, Certified Exit Planning Advisor. And you say, well, why would you be a MSR RFC, right? MRFC. Going back to those early days, right? It was the CFP, CHFC, those had the educate, that was sort of the back wheel, maybe the product knowledge. I'm on the bicycle, right? That's the product knowledge. But yet, if you didn't have the ability, the front wheel, right? To have to negotiate ethically, right? And that's what I find. People would do a lot of things. They were smart. A lot of smart guys went sideways because their wisdom or their smarts, they weren't using it in an ethical way. So I wanted to be part of an association that was global, that was not just the local thing. Because I think when you talk about ethics, if we can't have a mutual set of ethics that we agree on, the Philippines, the US, I don't care, China, Russia, and if we can't have something that we can agree on, well, then we'll never get together. So the goal was, as the world swells, how do you use that? So this association that was all over, that was just starting, I said, what, let me see if I can help put a shoulder to the wheel. And, I did some speaking in the early days for them and got involved. And, fortunately now I'm on the board of trustees. And, I look at the quality of those who sit on the board and the interest, we're old guys, but the interest of those that are behind us to try to see if we can get them to stand on our shoulders and go beyond. And so it's right now it's the beginning part. It's a small enough organization. We always wish it was bigger, but yet I think that using the global aspect of what can be accomplished cross-culturally within countries. I mean, I don't know what the tax laws are in the Philippines, but when I hear you talk about families and how people care about values and families, well, that unifies us right there. I can talk about that all day with probably almost every country, right? You don't hear that kind of conversation at other industry meetings. So here's our chance to see if we can really draw together and become better.
Yep. Great stuff. So last question for me before you go. What's in store for you and your family for the future?
I have a trust, and the trust says we're going to support family unity through impact experiences. So what's ahead for us? We're gonna allocate resources to do things together. So when I say I got 24 of us, so when I move, it's like I take them all, and that's what's ahead for us. We may not have. I mean, I'm fortunate they live around close to me, so I see quite a lot, and I go to a lot of sporting events, watching grandchildren. I have 14 grandchildren. They keep coming. 14 grandchildren. But it's those special, impactful events that make the difference. It's that building in the memory bank of what makes our family special. And so that's what's ahead for us as long as I'm around. Of course, the trust stays around. So the party goes on even when I'm gone. I mean, this is how our family does business. And I didn't want to have it. So that way I've got 4 daughters. And, one of the daughters would say, boy, we'd really love to be part of this, but, we really don't have the money. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to allocate financial resources so that whether someone comes 5 miles or 5,000 miles or spends $5 in gasoline or $5,000 in airfare, it's irrelevant. That's not going to be the barrier to having our family have family unity, right? And so it may not be equal, because one may get $5 to pay the gas and one gets 5,000, but it's going to be equitable and they're going to be together. And I can tell you that working on this is these kids are best of friends. These grandchildren are like brothers and sisters. It takes work, but that's the job, and it'll go on when I'm gone. That's the legacy.
Amazing stuff. And a great idea too. All right, so thank you so much, Roy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Rui, for being our honored guest in this episode of RFC's Tuesday Podcast Season 7, together with our international partners. Your deep expertise gave many of our members great ideas tonight, which I hope will help advance the financial consulting profession in the Philippines.
For sure. And again, thank you, Roy. So for everyone, please look forward to the last episode of the RFC Tuesday Podcast, Season 7. Our last speaker for this season is Mr. Aidil Akbar Majid, RFC. He is the president of the IARFC chapter in Indonesia. So if you have any questions on tonight's topic, please feel free to send it in the chat box, which we will review prior to the next episode. For RFC public courses and continuing education, trainings, and seminars, please visit the IARFC PH Facebook page for announcements on schedules. And a reminder for all the members, on renewal, active members receive free continuing education seminars, access to the official IARFC website, www.iarfc.org, where each member of good standing is recognized when searched by clients and prospects. Please do be reminded that we can only use the RFC designation if we are members of good standing. So for your membership renewal information, please contact Ms. Arlene Baguyo at iarfcph@gmail.com or 0917-645-7846. So contact IARFCPH now for your membership renewals.
Our podcast episodes are shown every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. That's why it's important for everybody to follow us on Facebook. Episodes are pre-recorded and are streamed through Facebook Live and now through the IARFC Philippines YouTube channel. So on behalf of our producer, Ms. Grace De Vera Escobar, this is the RFC Tuesday Podcast saying,
it's better to be in the know than to be the last to know.
Thank you, Roy, and good night, everybody.
Thank you, Roy, and good night, everyone. All right, bye.
See you guys.